We're based in Glenbrook, in the Lower Blue Mountains.
Hmm.
So that's about an hour west of Sydney. Our producer is based out near the Warrumbungles, so near Coonabarabran. So that's where Bloom was
Hmm.
inspired in terms of that surroundings. But we are living in nature, and you know, the Blue Mountains is a World Heritage Area. So we definitely understand conservation, and we're big on conservation here in the Blue Mountains. So it's always been inspiring for us to write something around nature and just the beauty of it. But that area around the Warrumbungles is just fantastic. It's so sensational in terms of
Mm.
those rocky outcrops, and yeah. Well, I think we can be inspired by all sorts of different things, but being in nature and having space away from, say, a noisy city allows your mind to process things and think.
Mhm.
So I think part of being in nature, it gives you, that insight into yourself, and it just allows you that space for whether it's a memory or, you might be thinking about the past, and it
Mhm.
just allows the ideas to flow more easily. So it could be either you're inspired by the nature, or being in the nature just allows those feelings and those thoughts to come up so you can actually write. So you need space. I need space, headspace, and a quiet place to actually write. Like I can't, if I'm too busy or distracted,
Mhm.
that's not connected to writing anyway. So that being around nature helps and inspires writing, and then being in an actual beautiful place can inspire a song. So Bloom was inspired by being, well, the story of people moving away from the city to rural areas after the lockdown, COVID-19 lockdown, but also being in that studio that had all the nature around it also inspired how we wrote the songs and actually how we recorded them. So there was a bit of the writing that happened before we went out there, and then when we were out there, how we recorded the songs as well, and how we used more organic sounds and tried to get inspired by the nature, which wasn't hard to do. It's so
Mhm.
beautiful out there. And it just, yeah, created that kind of enchanting type sound. And if you've ever been out to Coonabarabran and out that way, you know that it's like the place where you stargaze. It's got the largest telescope in the southern hemisphere, so
Mm.
it's all have an observatory there. And if you go out at night, which we did, and had a barbecue and looked out at the stars, it is absolutely amazing to look up the night sky and just be able to see the stars, and that's the place to see them. And so it inspires all this magical kind of thoughts and feelings. And when we were recording, specifically, Paul said, imagine that you're in a magical place, because it's about being in a forest, and we're out here, we've got the stars, and then just the way I sang it was definitely inspired by that kind of atmosphere and that nature. So I started talking to Paul because he was his studio was actually on the Central Coast,
Mhm.
which is now north of Sydney. Still a
Okay.
nice area, close to the beach. So we had recorded our previous EP there, and we reconnected with Paul and said we want to do another EP.
Mhm.
And he actually told me his story of moving out from the Central Coast out to the Warrumbungles. And I started looking at that, thinking about that, and I'd already written like the chord progression to Bloom, but I hadn't come up with exactly what the concept was going to be. I had an idea of the concept, and I
Mhm.
knew that it was going to be called Bloom. But then when I started thinking about what Paul had gone through in terms of moving out to the West, and he was, growing his own crops and doing that sort of thing. And a lot of people were doing that, and we were trying to do that, and we bought seeds during lockdown, all that kind of thing, and trying to grow our own, crops and things like that, to a certain level of success and not so successful. But yeah, it sort of inspired me to start thinking about that kind of journey that people made in terms of whether they moved permanently out, to rural areas, or even just wanted to escape the city and go out there, which we actually did as well. So we did a road trip out west and out to rural areas. And so that started me thinking about that whole idea. And then when we went out to the studio, we were out there for a week, on-site recording, and everything just came together with the whole concept of, being inspired by that natural surroundings and, moving away from the city to rural areas and trying to get back to nature and yeah, appreciate, the natural surroundings and get that organic sense we're trying to go for. Yeah, it's rolling hills of farmland.
Okay.
There's a creek. Here's a creek. And you have to, we stayed at two places. So there were two locations there. We walked from one house to the studio, and walking through like long grass, trees, creek and water, cows, horses. What else can I say? The studio itself is a house that has chickens and things like that. So farm animals, resident dog, resident cats. But yeah, you look out from the studio, the main part of the studio, and you can see part of the Warrumbungles. So you can see part of that landscape. Beautiful sunsets. You can go for a horse ride if you want to. You can feed the chickens. You can do all that kind of thing. So it's very much influenced and inspired by the farm and the nature. So you get to the place, completely unwind, and then you're sort of, working around what's happening in nature. If there's a storm, you stop for a bit and take in the storm. Look at it, look at the surroundings. You can drive up to the observatory or to the Warrumbungles lookout to get inspired by that. So it's very much laid back pace and allows the creativity to flow. But it is farmland, so it is surrounded by the farm.
Okay. So on that note, but kind of like a different aspect of it, is it surrounded by other houses as well, or is there anyone in the vicinity, or is it very far away, like in a remote area?
It's remote. So there's a studio and then another house that is a neighbouring house that it's an accommodation option. But the studio itself is on its own and just surrounded by farmland and hills. And yeah, the electricity was fine. The mobile reception is not the best. That is true. But I did manage to make phone calls. But the cows might be too loud. Or if it was a storm and it was because of tin roof, so if it rained too heavily, we would have to stop for a bit.
Okay, cool. So you totally have to kind of like do it in harmony with nature. So if there's something, like going on like a storm, then you stop because obviously you don't want to have it on your recording, or you do. You never know.
And the animals need to be fed and tended to. So we would go late into the late afternoon or into the early evening. We would have to pause because the animals would let you know that it's time to be fed. So you'd have to just pause for a bit and do a bit of farm work. But it was all part of the, being immersed in that environment. Yeah, well, it was something that I had a track that I'd laid down and it was fine. But then we decided that, and this is coming mainly from Paul, that we needed to make it more, I suppose, mystical or enchanting, and like you're in this, this forest and it's magical and that kind of thing. And because it is a magical area, with, like I was saying, with the stars and night sky. And so it was almost a bit like just trying to think of that environment and put it into the delivery, which was a little bit new for me. Like I've delivered things out of passion, but more raw in terms of what I was feeling at that time. And I know I wrote the lyrics to the song, and I know that it was about a forest and about moving, from the city and exploring, being in a rural area. But sometimes you can sing something, but just having someone help guide you in terms of the delivery of it, which was Paul did, it really helped me just make sure that I came across with that enchanting kind of feel and delivery in it. And a lot of stuff that I've written in the past has been, I suppose, a bit dark or inspired by sad events and things like that. So for me to sing a happy song is I can, but it's and I have, but it's not my natural thing, I suppose. And there, I do have happiness inside me, of course, but I've mostly written probably more sort of sad stuff, or deeper, darker stuff. So it was like a process, and being out there really helped to bring out that, that kind of I don't know, it's like a almost like a childlike kind of, magical sort of, I'm in a forest and look, and so it had to come out in how I sang, and I think it does achieve that. It's different for me to do that, but I like what the result was. So yeah, and it's a song.
So we're thinking about what you just said, that, it was kind of like a special sort of delivery for you. So I guess, once you get it, it's hard to kind of repeat it a lot of times, because it comes from this special place in your heart, I guess, and, in your soul, your singing place. So did you have to do a lot of takes of the vocals, or was it just like once you got it, there was just one continuous one?
Yeah, it wasn't one take, but because we lay several tracks. But no, I did get it, and it is in me. It was just a matter of me connecting with that part of myself, to the song, and being able to deliver it in that way. But yeah, no, I'm pretty good like that, actually. I don't take a lot of time with the tracks. Bloom is meant to be, it's not meant to be overproduced at all, as you can probably tell from the sound of it. It's meant to be a bit more of organic sound, and meant to be heartfelt, rather than overproduced, too much electronic effects or anything like that. So yeah, it's meant to be more natural, and that kind of folky sort of sound. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've not particularly, like we haven't with Paul. We do a lot of piano based work, which some of our earlier stuff doesn't use. I think the Mother Maud album had more electronic sounds and different kind of styles through it. So what we're working on with Paul, especially with this song, is definitely getting more of a natural sound, and getting that more organic thing going. But the thing that was different for us was the percussion elements. So Ben is he's a drummer, as well. So he's went to the conservatorium with for doing as a drummer, and so he likes to obviously have drums in a lot of the songs. So this was working with Paul's been a bit of a challenge for him at times, or a departure from having drums throughout a whole song. And so Paul's sort of encouraged different drum beats and using different percussion elements. And so this song, it uses, the djembe and the tambourine. We've used the djembe before, but it very heavily relies on that kind of rhythm and rhythmic elements from the percussion instruments used. And I just love that. I love how they've done that. So yeah, it's really, when I first heard it, I was, because I wasn't there for when Paul and Ben actually recorded that percussion bit. So I heard that later, and I was like, oh wow, guys, I love how you've done that. So yeah, it really brought it to a different level, different space for me.
Yeah, it's really pretty.
Well, to me, it's about whatever happens in your life, wherever you end up, you can find hope and you can find a life there. So that's what that saying is about. But it also was a little plaque that was hanging on the wall in the home where I grew up.
Oh,
so
okay.
I think it was my mother's, and it was right where we used to have a phone, and so I would see it in the kitchen pretty much every day growing up, and it just had one bloom, one flower, as the CD cover has. It just had that saying. It actually didn't have the whole thing. It had bloom where you were planted. I think it had. So it didn't have bloom wherever you were. Bloom, it didn't have bloom wherever you've landed. It just said bloom where you were planted. And so I thought about that. It just came into my mind as I was writing the song and coming up with the chords. And yeah, and because of everything that happened with COVID, and there was a lot of disruption in the world, with the what was going on in Ukraine as well. And I thought about people being uprooted and having to leave their homes, or they're leaving the city and going to rural areas or whatever's happening. And it's like, well, it's sort of, it's a bit like, a lot of, there can be, and that's part of the lyrics as well, as life can betray you. You can have all these best intentions of what you want to do with your life, but then you might get affected by war or uprooted or have to move or something happens, but you can find somewhere where you can build your life and you can bloom, I suppose. And it's all related to the seeds and planting and that kind of thing and making your life. So it's all metaphors for, you know, finding your way in life wherever you end up.
Yeah, so it kind of seems like Inception to me. I don't know if you've seen the movie because there's like layer and the layer and the layer. Yeah, very,
Yeah, I have seen it. Like,
very clever. And stuff.
that's the Warrumbungles. So
Ah,
that's
okay.
where we recorded in the Warrumbungles. So there actually was a bit recorded in the Blue Mountains. So
Mhm,
there's a bit we recorded near where we live.
mhm.
And that's you might see it when Ben's playing a djembe. That's just near our house in some forest. But the big scenery where I think it's you're going over this
Yeah.
rocky, that is the Warrumbungles. That's where we recorded. Yeah, and that's deliberate, of course. And the starry background, they're images from Coonabarra Bran and around the Warrumbungles. So that's all part of getting that magical feel into it.
Yeah, and it really works, to be honest. And I
Thank
think
you.
you should submit it to the Blue Mountains Council or something, as a tourism ad, or because it would be really suitable for
Yeah, thanks. Yeah,
that.
yeah.